The NFL Combine kicks off this week. So what positions should you have your eye on for the Green Bay Packers? What matters to them, especially as we head toward the 2024 NFL Draft with everything the team needs?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I say this every year around this time. You might not care about the NFL Combine. The Packers do care. If you look back at their draft history, not only do they care a lot. They care a lot. Athleticism has been a huge part. Athletic profile has been a huge part of the Packers draft strategy, especially in the Brian Gutekunst era. He has in particular, and especially if we take the 2021 draft out of it a little bit, because Amari Rodgers skews those totals a little bit. They didn't get a profile from Josh Myers. They could have taken Creed Humphrey. Don't even get me started down that path. The average Brian Gutekunst first rounder has a relative athletic score over 9. The average top 100 pick has a relative athletic score of 8.75, almost 9. Relative athletic score for the uninitiated is your athletic profile relative to your peers at your position. So if you're a safety, if you're a corner, if you're a tackle, how athletic are you relative to other guys who play the same position? And it's a height, weight, speed thing. It includes agility, all that important stuff. And so, okay, we know that this is important to Green Bay. I want to the most important position. And it is the position that even the old school, don't worry about the analytics. Don't think about this stuff too much. They call the Combine the underwear Olympics, those kinds of things. Corner is and always has been a stopwatch position. If you don't have baseline athleticism, you're not going to be able to do it. You just can't. Like Quentin Rollins was just not a fast enough, in particular, athlete. Josh Jackson was not a twitched up and loose enough athlete to do it. Just wasn't. And didn't make up for it in enough other ways. Did not have the technique and did not, as he did in college, make enough plays on the ball. If you go back and look at the corners that the Packers have drafted in the first round, or no, at all, top 100 in the Ted Thompson era and the Brian Gutekunst era, all of them have weighed at least 192. So like Kamar Lassiter, 180. If he weighs in at 185 at the Combine, I think he's just not going to be on the board, especially at the place where he's getting drafted. 7 of the 8 corners that have been taken in the top 100 were 5'11" or taller. Jair Alexander is the outlier, but he was 196 and he ran 4.3s. So he had an irrelevant athletic score well over 9. A truly elite athlete, despite being a little bit smaller. Height. The Packers do not seem to compromise on weight. Density is a thing for them. They'll take Randall Cobb a little bit shorter, 195. They'll take Amari Rodgers, 200 pounds. It's a different game. You need to have that density. And 6 out of the 8 had a relative athletic score over 8. Now, there is an element of this. We've been talking a lot since Jeff Hafley was hired, But before we heard him speak, before we heard Matt LaFleur speak, thinking, okay, they're going to play a bunch more man coverage. They're going to want press man corners. And so we need to focus on guys who can play press man. But now what we know is they're going to play what Jeff Hafley referred to as vision and break, which is a version of the Robert Saleh defense that is steeped in cover 3 principles. This is the evolution of the Pete Carroll Legion of Boom defense. So, all of a sudden, Cooper DeJean can play corner in this defense. All of a sudden, TJ Tampa, who we're going to get to him, makes a little bit more sense. Because he was seen, I think a lot of people think he's a cover 2 corner. Cover 3, Nate Wiggins, maybe a little stiff, cover 3 corner. He's on the Packers board now in a way that maybe he wasn't if they were going to play a lot more man coverage. Just for reference, man coverage rates in 2023, this is per FTN Fantasy. The 49ers playing the solid defense as coordinated by Steve Wilks, but with heavy influence from Kyle Shanahan, played man coverage on 32.6% of snaps. The Texans, as coordinated by DeMeco Ryans, with Derek Stingley at corner, a man corner, 36.5%. The Packers played 34.8%, right in the middle of man coverage. Now the Jets, with Sauce Gardner and those boys, 47.5%. But when Sauce was a rookie, before they knew he could just shut down a side of the field, the Jets played 37.8% man coverage. The 49ers, with DeMeco Ryans, played 36.3% man coverage, almost the exact same that they ran in Houston. This is not a defense that is going to require a ton of man. Now, in third down situations, in red zone situations, second and long, they're still going to mix pressures and man coverage. It's still going to be something you're going to have to do. And if you're a press corner, you don't have to be a man cover corner to be a press corner. Richard Sherman was a press corner, but not a man corner. And so that gives you a little bit more flexibility on who you can draft. But you still need that baseline athleticism. So you're still going to be looking for guys who are 5'11 or taller, who are 195 probably in that range or bigger, and who run 4.5 or faster. When you get outside of that, it becomes problematic. And you'd like to have a guy who has experience playing some off coverage, reacting to the quarterback, reading, all that stuff. That's not really where Eric Stokes is at his best. That's not really where Carrington Valentine is at his best. So does that mean they need a totally revamped secondary? Does that mean they need to go out and sign a corner and draft 2? It might. It might. Now they say, no, we like our guys. We think that they can do all the things that we're going to ask. Certainly they played plenty of off zone coverage under Joe Barry. Just because you're playing zone doesn't mean you have to play passive. Richard Sherman loved to press. He loved to get his hands and reroute guys, jam them at the line of scrimmage, and then still play a little press bail. He can do that. This Packers defense is going to do that. If they're going to take a first-round corner, and I think they are, at least right now, they're going to have to run fast. They're going to have to jump high. They're going to have to test agility as well, but the agility is a little less important if you're going to play a bunch of a zone. Then it becomes more, can you play press? And if you can, you're going to be on the Packers' radar. We close the show with a mock draft Monday. Finally, we have a mock draft Monday. And I have a name that I don't think people are thinking about in the first round. But after he tests, that's going to change. Offensive line is another place where the Packers have these long-standing trends. I think they're going to take some offensive line in this draft. They always do, generally. Ted Thompson did it. Ron Wolf did it. Brian Gutekunst has done it. They need some depth on this team. We're going to talk about the things we should be looking for here as we get through Indy in just a second on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite players, teams, quick bets, same-game parlays, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. The Bucks, all of a sudden, a couple monster wins against playoff teams. They've got the 5th hardest schedule to close the season. But they're still right up there in terms of finals odds. I think Giannis is still a good bet. MVP closed the season really, really well. You're getting good odds there. The Luka odds are also pretty good. I would check the Luka odds for MVP as well. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. The Packers love to draft offensive tackles and put them other places. So if you're looking at offensive line in this draft, you're going to start there. The one caveat is they like to draft tackles to play tackle. They like to draft tackles to play guard. They like to draft centers to play center. Josh Myers was a collegiate center. Corey Linsley was a collegiate center. You go back. Scott Wells was a collegiate center. Elton Jenkins was a collegiate center. He stuck at guard, but I think they were going to give him a chance to play center as well. They were going to give him a chance to play tackle once he proved to be a really, really good guard, a really good pass protector. So have your eyes on tackles, and then I would not be surprised if they drafted a true center in this draft, because the Josh Myers experiment, it's not going great. Remember back, Everydayers will remember, we did our team needs episode where we looked at the lowest graded guys. Josh Myers was one of the lowest graded guys I believe the lowest graded guy on the offense, along with John Runyon Jr. And so that's just a position where they're going to have to take some swings. Now, what's interesting is they have not traditionally cared as much about arm length. Brian Bulaga had below average, short, not just below average, short arms, 33.25. You go, why does that matter? Well, it matters because just like in boxing, if you have more reach than your opponent, then you can get beat and react and win anyway, because you can control. You got big, long arms, offensive lineman, someone like Tyron Smith, who's got 36-inch arms. You can get beat and recover because you have the length. And in a one-on-one combat situation, a hand fight, if you've got longer arms, you can control them, and it's harder for them to get you off of their body because they don't have the length to get into your chest. So if you get hands on first, it is easier for you to win. That being said, it didn't matter for Brian Bulaga, 33.25. That's well below average. David Bakhtiari, 34 is really the cutoff for most teams. That is the known marker. 34-inch. If you don't have 34-inch or better arms, you probably can't play tackle in the league. That is conventional wisdom. Well, David Bakhtiari is at 34. Zach Tom's at 34. Elton Jenkins at 34. Rasheed Walker at 33 and 5/8. All those guys below the combine average for tackles. So that tells you that the Packers are willing to give a little more leeway on that than maybe some other teams are. Now, that being said, there is still a point at which you just can't do it. You look at the guards that they've had. Josh Sitton, 32-inch arms. TJ Lang, 32-inch arms. Sean Ryan, 32-inch arms. So there is a point at which, okay, these collegiate tackles with short arms, you move into guard, you can do it. Because if you can hang a tackle with short arms in college, moving into guard mitigates that issue. But if you were able to play well at tackle, that means your feet are good enough, your athleticism is good enough, and your technique is good enough that the shorter arm issue, it's not like it just goes away inside. It's just a little bit less of a problem. It's a little bit like slow corners. You say, okay, you move a slow corner to safety. What do you have? You have a slow safety. Being slow is still a problem. So having short arms is not ideal, but you're mitigating it to some degree. I actually don't think moving a slow corner to safety makes sense. Like if you run 4.57, that's still slow. That's still potentially problematic. Now I know Brian Branch did not run super fast and became a really good player. Some guys can overcome it, but you're betting on outliers, and I just frankly don't like to do that. The Packers traditionally also don't like really big dudes. So Jordan Morgan is 6'6", 330. The Packers have drafted a player that big 0 times since 2010. Marshall Newhouse was the last offensive lineman that they drafted over 321 pounds. Sean Ryan, 321. They had not taken a guy that big since Marshall Newhouse in 2010. We're talking about 15 years worth of drafts. So there's a couple guys for whom that's true. So are those guys going to be on their radar? Are they going to change some of these things that if they test really well? Like if you're 330, and I think like Tyler Guyton, if you test really well, 6'7", 330, but he tests crazy, I think he's going to be on the Packers' radar. It's just hard for guys 330 to come in with, a relative athletic score above 9 or above 8. It's just hard for guys that big to move that well. Now, if you look at, there are some guys, Washington's Troy Fatano, someone who I think, is 317 in that range, a tackle who may have to play guard. Well, that one works. What about J.C. Latham? He's a tackle, 6'6", 335. That's bigger than the Packers traditionally like, but is it too big? What if Taliesin Fuaga falls? Top 15 kind of player. He's 6'6", 334, probably going to play guard in the league. Are they just not going to take him because he's so big? Amarius Mims, 6'7", 340, but like moves like he's 240. Is that just a non-starter? I don't know. No, maybe that makes someone like Graham Barton from Duke kind of the perfect Packer in that way because he played tackle, can play guard or center. I wouldn't rule him out in the first, by the way, but I don't think they're going to draft someone in the first who's going to play guard. I think 41 might be that sweet spot where, let's say, Fatano falls. You have someone like Graham Barton. They fall to 41. The fall is all relative, right? Like, we don't know where guys are falling is based on supposed to go. We don't know where guys are supposed to go. Falling relative to narrative, that seems silly. Like, we don't know. We don't know what teams really think of these guys in a lot of cases. So it seems like that would make some sense that 41 would be the place. Elton Jenkins was 44? So you're talking about a top 50 pick on an interior offensive lineman, but a tackle who can play tackle in a pinch, but is going to compete to be your starting right guard. And if you lose that job, can compete to be your starting center. You can have them sort of simultaneously competing. That's tough. Like if you're Graham Barton, you're a tackle and you're going to play guard and learn center and learn both of those positions and compete to start at both of those. Like it gets to be a lot. The last thing on the offensive line that I want to mention is there is this sort of magic marker that Josh Norris from Underdog has been big on, and it's the short shuttle. And it's one of those funny things where if you just kind of sight unseen drafted all the guys, all the offensive linemen who hit this short shuttle marker, you'd be in good shape. 4.47 seconds. By the way, Zach Tom ran a 4.47 short shuttle. They hit at a higher rate than like any other offensive line marker you can look at. The Packers have a disproportionate, if you look at all the guys drafted in the last like 15 years, the Packers have a disproportionately high number of those guys. in part because they prioritize athleticism so much. It is such an important thing for offensive linemen. If you can't move, especially in this offense, with the amount of wide zone and stuff that they do on the move now, pin and pull runs, crack toss, you got to be able to move. That's another reason why they just don't take big guys, because big guys generally can't move that well. We'll see if that changes. I don't expect it to. And we'll see if some of these guys come in a little bit lighter, like Jordan Morgan might come in at 320 and you go, okay, that's close enough. But 330, it's too far. It's too far. Or is 6'6" because he's 6'6". There's a density similarity between someone 6'6", 330 and 6'4", 215 or 315. So you're just saying, yeah, the similar body sizes really. One's just 2 inches taller. They can carry more weight. They can move the same kind of way. We don't know the answer to that right now. Maybe we'll get the answer in the draft. Speaking of the draft, let's mock draft Monday this one. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you get an extra hour in your day? Nap? Work out? Read a book? All those things seem pretty great. I need like 2 or 3 extra hours in my day. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time were unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. Wouldn't that be nice? It sounds simple, but we all know this can be really hard to do in practice. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, convenient, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right. Let's get to a mock draft Monday. In the first, this is currently my first round sleeper. I think safety is not out of the question. Tyler Newman is going to have to test well. I think Cam Kitchens would have to test really well. And the problem for him is his last season was not as good as the season before, although the Packers have never had problems with that. Dontavian Wicks, that was true. Like this whole last draft class, the 2 years ago film was better than the last year film. Jordan Love was like that. They will watch your whole career and go, oh, we see the traits in this other season, even if we didn't see it in your most recent season. TJ Tampa is one of those guys. When I thought this was going to be a press man team, I kind of dismissed TJ Tampa because he's 6'2", 200. Now, I don't know if he's actually 200. I think he's probably 6'2", 190. Like he's probably playing at like 195, 192. He may slim a little to run the 40, but I think he's going to run fast. He looks fast to me on tape for a guy his size. For a guy 6'2", almost 200 pounds, he looks fast. And if he runs low 4, let's say he runs 4.45 even, that's going to put to bed a lot of concerns that you usually have about zone corners and their ability to match vertical. Can he get in and out of breaks with the best receivers? No. One of the guys at Texas cooked him on a little whip route in the red zone. Those routes are nearly impossible to cover for almost anyone. I hesitate to even say this, but there are times when he reminds me of Richard Sherman. For this reason, relax, for this reason, he is huge. And it's not like his hips are super fluid, but because he has great speed for a guy his size, if he gets beat inside, he is so good at undercutting, working underneath the ball. And that was a Richard Sherman special. The best I've ever seen for a big corner. Him and Patrick Peterson. Him and Darrelle Revis. Patrick Peterson could do it too. But their ability to, for a limited athlete in what Richard Sherman was, he made up for it with stuff like that. Like Patrick Peterson and Darrelle Revis are special athletes. And Revis and Pat Pete, like they played a lot more man coverage. Sherman as a zone corner understood where his help was, and he could undercut these routes. And it was really special to see. Tampa's got some of that. I think he fits very well with what the Packers want to be, because when he's going to play man, he's going to play press man. Otherwise, he's playing zone with eyes to the quarterback. That's exactly what the Packers want from a corner. If Cooper DeJean is off the board, TJ Tampa's your guy. Okay, taking all the things we talked about into consideration with offensive line, Kingsley Suamatia from BYU, not an old BYU offensive lineman like Brady Christensen was a couple years ago. I think he's still only 21. Tackle, the fit's the right size. If he tests the way that I think he can, this is right in the range. I wouldn't be surprised if he sneaks into the first round. He's getting some first round buzz. I like this in this spot. Can he be a tackle? Maybe. Give him a shot. Give him the Derek Sherrod shot. Let him play guard first. Let him compete at right guard. And if not, he's your swing tackle and you're in really good shape moving forward. If Rasheed Walker doesn't work out, maybe it's Kingsley. Plus, you've already got a Kingsley on your team. Come on. How about two? At 57, I went Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas. Coming off a serious injury, but you don't need him right away to run your offense. So let him come back year two. And maybe that is when he can take over full-time. Aaron Jones can become more of a secondary player. Even as the year gets on, he gets more and more carries. You probably have to get another guy on day 3. Maybe a cheap level free agent, though I don't see that happening. Jonathan Brooks has the most upside of any running back in this class. When he was healthy, he was a borderline first-round pick. And so you're getting really good value here at 57, even if you're not going to get him right away because you have Aaron Jones. You don't need him right away. I mentioned that the Packers like to draft tackles to play guard or tackle, but they like to draft centers to play center. Cedric Van Pran from Georgia is a guy who I think could be on the Packers' radar. He's got to test well enough, but you've got the pedigree, the program, all that stuff. I think this makes a lot of sense for them. At this range, you've got the extra pick in the third, so you can get a little cute here if you want to. With that second, third round pick, I took Dadrian Taylor-Demerson from Texas Tech. He was someone that I put out on the Twitter machine who qualifies as the kind of guy who fits a lot of the traits that the Packers are looking for in a post safety. 5'11", 195. So he's in that Darnell Savage size. And there are some similarities with Darnell Savage. He has range. He can be that eraser. Middle field, sideline to sideline. Come down, make a tackle. Come across, get his hands on a pass. At this point in the draft, you're not going to get a perfect player. But I wanted, and this is maybe a little early based on the consensus right now, but go out and test well, test the way that he plays. If he runs 4.41, jumps 38, this is not going to be a crazy spot for him, but this was a name I wanted to get on your radar just so it was someone that you're like, okay, if he blows up testing and all of a sudden lands on day 2 and you go, wait, who is this? I wanted you to be able to say, oh, I've heard about that guy on Locked On Packers, because I think he's someone that could catch the Packers' eye. All right, back tomorrow as we work through the combine. Much more to get through this week on Locked On Packers. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Go subscribe over there, Locked On Packers. And of course, subscribe on our YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.